Hello and again, welcome. We are here still talking about Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. Now, we talked about sort of the feminist issues. I have probably mangled them horribly. Get it? Mangled them horribly. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the economic issues of the book, which I touched upon, but I kind of wanted to leave for this. But it's hard to do that because, as we said, the issues of economics and the issues of gender or sexism are strongly intertwined in this book. They're a large part of Woolf's thesis that you need to have economic independence in order to make art. So the first place that she really brings this up is near the beginning of her narrative. Now, she has taken on a fictional character in order to describe her thoughts and her researches and everything, to compress what I'm sure was a lot of thinking down into 2 days. And the narrator decides to go to Oxbridge College, fictionalizing, of course, of Oxford and Cambridge. And this is part of her thoughts on women in fiction. What is it about women in fiction? What am I going to write about women in fiction? And there are several points where she realizes that, number one, of course, she is prohibited from enjoying the full facilities simply because she is a woman, right? She's trying to walk across the green and a beetle shows up, not a bug, but a person. A beetle shows up and says, "You can't walk there, the paths are for women, the grass is for men." And she tries to go to a library, and this librarian is like, "I'm very sorry, madam, you cannot come in unless you have a signed letter from the thing." And she's really, really put off about that. And she stops by a cathedral, and she hears people singing, and she's kind of like, well, I'm not even going to try to go in there. I'll probably get stopped again. But that leads her to thinking about this college that she's visiting with its libraries and its halls and its cathedrals. And she thinks about all the money that was poured into this. She talks about them pouring silver, foundations of silver and gold, where royalty sort of donates money to build a college because education's a good thing. And merchants pour money in there to send their children to college. And then the people who graduate, they go on to become successful, and they send money back. And it's just money on money on money on money on money. And now Oxbridge, as a well-funded institution, has the money to build these big, fancy colleges and buildings that women aren't allowed to go into. And then after that, then she has a lovely lunch at Oxbridge, which is some fish in a lovely cream sauce. There's roast pheasant. There's these delicate desserts, which are really, really nice. There's wine, red wine and white wine. And she just beautifully renders this luncheon that she has. And at the end of it, she talks about how afterwards, where everyone's eaten well, they've been drinking their wine, and it's just the perfect situation for just the ability to talk, what she calls to light the warm yellow flame of rational intercourse. And I'm sure you felt it, right? After you've had a really good meal with some friends and you can relax and you have a bit of a moment to just chill and you just talk about stuff and you're comfortable and everybody's comfortable and you get to talk about things that maybe you wouldn't talk about if you were at work or trying to shovel down your lunch in a lunch period. There's a certain ease that the students and faculty at Oxbridge have that allows them to talk about these wonderful things. And that, of course, is going to lead perhaps some of them to write things, right? Where they write poetry or fiction or other types of books. And it's very nice. Oxbridge sounds lovely. I would love to study there. I probably could. But then she goes to Furnham College for dinner. And Furnham, again, another fictional college, but it is a women's college. And when she gets there, she notes that the dinner that they are given is like a gravy soup. And unlike in Oxbridge, where the plates are very fancy and they got patterns and stuff, the Furnham plates are just plain white. The soup is kind of thin. Instead of roast pheasant, they have just beef and vegetables, which is sort of a lower class meal, I suppose. And they don't have these delicate pastries. What they just have there, they have biscuits, they have cookies, they have dry biscuits. They don't drink red and white wine, they drink water. And when the meal is done, everybody sort of pushes their chairs back and they go off to do whatever they do. So there aren't really these big ideas that are being handled by women at Furnham because they aren't eating the kinds of food, they aren't enjoying the kinds of atmosphere that the men over at Oxbridge are. And she kind of starts to wonder, and she goes into a beautifully sarcastic passage, which I read in another video, so I'm not going to reread it here, but where she sarcastically wonders, well, why didn't the women who worked so hard to raise the bare minimum amount of money to start this college. Why didn't they donate? Why didn't they become big business magnates and donate all of their money, the generational wealth, to this college? And of course the answer is they couldn't. They didn't have that. And so what Woolf is setting up are a couple of things. Number one, the idea that money begets money. If you have money, it's much, much easier to get more money, right? The people, I'm sure any of you who have graduated university have noticed that your college, your university probably sends you mail about donating to them. I know mine does, and I don't. But they send you mail, hey, please donate to the college, right? We're building a new library, we're building a new gym, we're building this or that other thing. And there are wealthy alumni who feel very beholden to their educational institutions, who believe that because they went to this school or that school, that is what opened up the opportunities for them that allowed them to become wealthy. And that may well be true. And they feel an obligation to some degree to return that. And that is wonderful. That is on its face. That is a great thing. I'm a big fan of returning favors. I'm a big fan of paying what you owe. And acknowledging the debts that you have incurred to various degrees. And I think it's a fine thing to send money back to your school. I don't, and that's a whole other thing that I'm not going to talk about here. But so what happens is these wealthy people send a lot of money back to their school, which allows the school to build the facilities and hire the teachers to generate more wealthy people. And it just sort of grows and grows and grows like that. And so that's why you see people from these big institutions who end up being able to trade on their name alone, right? I'm sure Harvard and Yale and Cambridge and Princeton and Georgetown produce some fantastic scholars and brilliant people, but they also produce a bunch of, let's just call them entitled jackoffs, who kind of trade on the name of the place where they went. They say, I went to Harvard, and they know people who know people, and Grandpapa helped fund a library or something like that. And they gained success that they probably didn't earn, but that's the point that Woolf is making. Wealth begets wealth. And a place like this Fernham College doesn't have a whole lot of money as it is, and it's not producing the kind of people who will have money to send back. And so a school like Fernham College, and I'm sure there's plenty of colleges like that elsewhere, is not creating that cycle of wealth that they need to get bigger and better and improve and get better facilities and better teachers and all that stuff. And so this idea that wealth begets wealth is kind of an important aspect of economic inequality that's part of this book, right? Men, and she intersects it, of course, with gender issues and sex issues throughout history. And just that men have historically been the ones to hold on to wealth. And for Woolf, this wealth is kind of what you need in order to be an artist, in order to be a writer. You need to be financially independent. You need to have the ability to control your own life to one degree or another. In fact, at one point where she writes about how she has this 500 pounds a year bequest from her aunt, and she says this, where she says, no force in the world can take from me my 500 pounds. Food, house, and clothing are mine forever. Therefore, not merely do effort and labor cease, but also hatred and bitterness. I need not hate any man. He cannot hurt me. I need not flatter any man. He has nothing to give me. We could draw out from that the idea that something like a universal basic income would be great, where if everybody could rely on a certain amount of money per year, that would really ease up a lot for them in terms of being able to do the thing that they wanted to do. And I think that is a really good point that, again, is part of the socioeconomic message of this book, is that if you want to raise people who are creative, then you need to allow people to live their lives. And in order to do that, they have to have a certain level of financial independence. It reminds me of a quote from Stephen Jay Gould, who was a biologist, who I presume, given the context of the quote, was probably asked about Einstein's brain, right? What makes Einstein so impressive? Is it part of the structure of his brain? Is it the number of folds? Is it the way that, I don't know, the way it floats in the jar? What is it about Einstein's brain that makes it so special? And Gould replied with this, which has always struck me. He said, I am somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. And I think Woolf would have agreed with this to some degree. Woolf probably would agree that there are brilliant minds, brilliant, creative, evocative, amazing minds that we would probably hold up on par with the greats, with Shakespeare and Milton and Coleridge, but who were just unable to produce and work at their craft. And in fact, in order to illustrate this, Woolf creates Judith, who is Shakespeare's sister, not to be confused with the pop band of the 90s. And she kind of illustrates how if you had a woman, a sister to William Shakespeare, who was just as creative and brilliant and driven as William, she would not have been able to do what William Shakespeare did. She would have been barred in many, many ways. Her parents would have tried to marry her off. If she had escaped and gone to London, there's no way she could have been part of the theater, because women would be turned away at the door, and she probably just would have killed herself and be buried at a crossroads. And even if she had been able to write, Woolf says that her writing would probably come out twisted and wrong, because she's writing, sort of hammering through all the problems that she has had to deal with. And so, I mean, again, you can see where this intersectionality is really important, that Judith Shakespeare did not have the luxury to live her own life because she didn't have the money to live her own life, and she didn't have the money because she was a woman. You can't really separate these things out. I know I'm kind of separating them out for my video because I'm a YouTuber now and that's what I do. But I think it's important to extend that to almost anybody, that there are almost certainly people out there who would be brilliant if only they had the economic freedom to do the thing that they really wanted to do. In fact, at the end of the book, Woolf kind of lays it straight out, where she says that intellectual freedom depends on material things. Poetry depends on intellectual freedom, and women have always been poor. What would Woolf's solution to this be? I don't know. She doesn't really offer one. She doesn't really talk about what a possible solution. She doesn't lay out sort of, here's a plan for universal basic income, or here's how we can reduce economic inequality. She kind of fobs that off on future generations and says, this is something you got to figure out, guys, because I ain't got anything. But I think that reading Woolf today in the 21st century, and then looking around at the world around us and realizing that there are people who are suffering greatly under economic hardship. And there's a lot of ways to look at that. You could look at that and say, well, you chose a certain path in life, and that path does not lead to wealth. That path does not lead to comfort, and that is the result of your choice. Oh, well. And that maybe is a valid argument if you're interested in some sense of economic fairness, right? That the world is I don't know, that the world is a kind of game that you win or lose if you play by the rules, except that we know that if you play the wealthy don't play by the rules, and we know that, but that's another thing for another time. The other take on this is, if you value art, if you value poetry and literature and art and music and theater, and Woolf wouldn't have talked about it, but television and movies and games and all these other things, all this other stuff that for some reason we're offloading on AI, and I haven't quite figured out why that is. No, I have, because it's money again. But if you value that, then what you should be in favor of doing is providing people the ability to do that. Wouldn't it be great if all of these brilliant creative people had space in their lives to create the stuff they want to create, to make the things they want to make the songs and the music and the books and the paintings and the sculptures that they are driven to create, but can't. That they've had to take that creative urge and put it away, or, God forbid, strangle it in the cradle, because they know that they're never going to have the time and the money to do that. I tend to think in that direction. Sure, it might result in fewer billionaires, or fewer kind of weird AI tech things, or light bulbs that change color when you fart at them. I don't know. Okay, fine. But I would be so happy with more art, more stories, more literature, more things. And I would love people to be able to feel like they can produce that. And I think Woolf would have liked that too. Woolf kind of says to her audience at the very end of the book, you are part of an ongoing conversation. You're part of an ongoing process. Your job now is to take up this torch and to write and continue to write and inspire more people to write. But again, you can't do that unless you have the financial and economic freedom to do that. So yeah, this book, as I said, whenever I read it, I've read it a few times now for my classes, and every time I read it, that's what I think of. I think of the video streamers that I know on Twitter who are constantly putting up donation pages because they want to make more stuff, but they can't because they've had a car accident or a sick pet. We see people who are creating despite their financial difficulties, people who are doing the hustle, right? Running a YouTube channel like this one, perhaps, because they know that it is their only creative way to make money. And then in comes AI, which is basically undercutting that, right? You can make art without having a creator behind it. You can make a picture or a poem or a book without a human being involved. And so there are all these brilliant people who now, even if they could get paid for it, they're not, because these companies are opting to have a very, very flawed electronic intelligence created for them. Anyway, I'm rambling, but as I said, it's kind of in the spirit of Virginia Woolf to take a thought and follow it and see where it goes. But I think, again, if you are interested in the economic inequalities and their relationships to art, this is a book to read. You want to take a look at it. And it is difficult, as you can already see, it is difficult to disentangle that from issues of feminism as well, which is right and natural, and you should not try to disentangle them. So anyway, we will continue on another topic, hopefully more focused next time. Let's see how we do. But thank you very much for stopping by, and I will see you in the next video.